must say, I love the warmth that is in this virtual room today. And really, that is the spirit of this final webinar in the African American Heritage Commission's CARES webinar series. We see today as a conversation among colleagues, many of us who are navigating similar realities. So thank you for being here today. My name is Angela Thorpe, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, which holds as its mission to preserve, promote, and protect North Carolina's African American history, arts, and culture for all people. And we are happy that today is the final webinar in our 6-part webinar series, Sustaining North Carolina's African American Heritage Institutions During COVID-19. During this series, we've explored how our state's Black heritage institutions can think innovatively about navigating the pandemic, with insights from multiple people like the folks you are going to hear from today. The Commission received a North Carolina CARES Humanities Relief Grant from the North Carolina Humanities Council to execute this series. You can learn more about the North Carolina Humanities Council online at www.nchumanities.org. Funding for NC CARES has been provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act Economic Stabilization Plan. Before we move forward, I'm going to share just a couple of housekeeping notes. Today, please drop your questions in the chat where it will be monitored, and we'll have time for question and answer at the end. Again, we see today as a conversation between colleagues, so we do encourage you to offer questions. I want to also thank the members of my team who made today possible: Adrian Nearday, Associate Director, and Kima Lassiter, Arts and Outreach Coordinator. As well, Erica Johnson, who was a graduate student in North Carolina Central University's history program, and Miranda Clinton, an emerging professional. Both Erica and Miranda's work was funded by this grant, as well as the participation of 2 students, one from University of North Carolina at Greensboro and one from North Carolina Central University, Kyrie Mason and Cliff Whitfield. Each of these young gentlemen was able to attend this webinar series and be paid for their participation through this grant. I'll also note that today's webinar will be available by recording, so all participants and registrants will receive a link at the end of the day. With that, I'm going to ask Adrian to share who we have with us today, and then we will start our conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angela. I have the pleasure today of introducing our speakers. Today, we are joined by Rodney Dawson. Rodney is a High Point native who throughout his upbringing had teachers that provided care, nurturing, and interest to his well-being and success, as well as a mother who developed his desire to serve. Shortly after high school, he entered the U.S. Army and received his first duty assignment in South Korea. He also served during the Persian Gulf War, as well as in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Iraq. Upon returning home, Rodney began a career in radio, which unexpectedly led to education. All the while, Rodney used his experiences and resources gained from military service to continue his education. Wanting to understand how to best serve his students, he then went on to receive an Ed.S. in educational leadership. Presently, he is pursuing an educational doctorate in educational leadership. He has worked in education and mass communications for the past 20 years and is always striving to seek better ways to equip and serve our learners to be able to compete successfully in our global society. Rodney left the classroom in June of 2018, and today Rodney serves as the education curator for the Greensboro History Museum. We are also joined by Angela Lee, who is the Executive Director of Hayti Heritage Center, a historic cultural arts and education venue in Durham, North Carolina. The center serves as a cultural hub for the city's African-American community and provides core programs in visual and performing arts, as well as offering facility rentals and historic tours. The venue, originally opened as a church in 1891, is listed on the National Historic Registry. She recognizes that the arts are a critical vehicle for social justice and change. Her advocacy and activism extend beyond her work and into the community she serves and the community in which she lives. She currently makes her home in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. We are also joined by Freshelle Scott, who is a native of Oxford, North Carolina. She began studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She received her BA in political science in 1999. She moved to Durham to attend law school in 2001, and she earned her Juris Doctorate from North Carolina Central University School of Law in 2004. For just over a decade, she served as the manager of 2 historic site properties within the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, and currently serves as the managing director of the Pauli Murray Center for History and Social Justice. She also serves as an attorney, strategic consultant, and board member to a number of institutions and organizations, including the Durham County Alcohol Beverage Control, as well as Oxford United Investors. Her outside interests include history, horses, and travel. And last but not least, we are also joined by Lacey Wilson, who is the site manager for the Charlotte Hawkins Brown State Historic Site in Gibsonville, North Carolina, where she is honored to continue to tell the story of Dr. Brown and the Palmer Memorial Institute. Lacey holds an MA in history with concentration in museum studies from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, where she collaborated on Etched in Stone, question mark, Governor Charles Aycock and the Power of Commemoration, a permanent exhibition and winner of the 2019 Award of Excellence and the 2019 Award in Progress from the American Association for State and Local History. Prior to her time at the site, she also served as a historic interpreter at the Owens Thomas House and slave quarters in Savannah, Georgia. And her work there was highlighted in the New York Times and on NPR's 1A radio show. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrienne, for those introductions. So to my colleagues, our first question for today, and I would be grateful to hear specifically from Freshelle, Angela, and Lacey. Talk to us about what it has been like to lead an institution through a pandemic.
So I'll start. It's been hard. That goes without saying. It was a challenge I didn't sign up for. Wasn't in my employment contract anywhere unless it goes under the category of shows adaptability. This was not anything that any of us could plan for. But I would say that we face the same uncertainties that most institutions face, and that was magnified during the pandemic, because it wasn't just sort of the ordinary day-to-day operations that you had to be concerned with. Those were always ongoing, but there was this more magnified and intense level of concern and care for our team members. We are a small team. We use a lot of student workers from Duke University. Some of them are coming from the West Coast, some of them are local, some of them are coming from overseas. And so with all of the uncertainty with the pandemic, these are young people just out on their own in the world for the first time and going through a global pandemic where they weren't certain what was going on with their families. And so there's also that self-care that was required for ourselves. So it was, there was just this constant low anxiety of not knowing what was going to happen and trying to still produce because you know that the work that you're doing is important for our communities and for public perception and public discourse. You know that that's important, and you still have to take care of one another and of yourself. It was incredibly challenging to go through this period, and it seems like it's still ongoing. I think there's some things that we've mastered in terms of shifting programming to a virtual platform. Those are things that we feel very comfortable with now, but in the initial stages, absolutely not. Like there was that definitely the feeling of chicken with your head cut off. What are we going to do? The henny penny, the sky is falling. All manner of just real uncertainty permeated the work for a while there.
I agree with everything Rochelle just said. For me, I had accepted and got this position during the pandemic. So in addition to learning how to work at a state historic site and state culture and government culture and the history of the site that I knew some of, I was very much trying to figure out how all that worked during the pandemic. I am very much still meeting people in this position virtually entirely, and there's a lot of apologies of, oh, I can't wait to meet you in person. A lot of apologies in terms of training, of just like, I don't know how to train someone during this, or learning on the job. And for me, it's always, since I got this position, been a challenge of trying to figure out how do we make this work. It's very much the process of me of just asking a lot of questions, checking with a lot of people before I make decisions as I go, as well as checking in on myself and my coworkers to make sure we're all doing what we can in order to care for each other and taking the breaks that we can. And maybe someone needs to work from home today just so they can get their head into a better space. I feel like we've been trying to extend a lot of grace, which is necessary in terms of moving forward, but there's also been a lot of excitement about things we want to do and things we want to get done. And some of those successes have actually happened, and I'm excited to see them, but I am also very much still trying to keep the balls in the air a lot of the time.
For me, being at Hayti, I'll say it's been sort of like a roller coaster ride, because the speed is up, down, it's fast and furious, in trying to, just sort of go on and navigate, and the twists and turns unexpectedly. The difference though with the roller coaster and with kind of where we've been is that I feel as the ED, working with what I consider to be a really good team, we're sort of the ones driving that roller coaster. So it's been up to us to try and figure out, where the twists and turns are occurring, how drastic they're going to be, and kind of where we're going to land on this thing. But as Rochelle and Lacey have said, it's been difficult. I can't imagine Lacey coming into a position during the pandemic. At least we were already there, but it was one of those, oh, this is really happening. We're really getting ready to close. For Hayti, a lot of what we do with programming involves, public access. We do a lot of, we do a lot of public events. So for us, we had to switch gears and figure out what to do while we've been closed to the public, but also how we can do those things. Because, pre-COVID, we had a budget. Pre-COVID, we had a plan for our season, for our year. Post-COVID, not knowing how long it was going to extend, we thought, okay, we can make some temporary shifts. But now here it is, almost a year later, and we've had to make some dramatic shifts. So, being in a position to have to navigate those and get creative and being able to pivot, it's been very challenging. But at the same time, there's a certain level of excitement that comes with such a huge challenge. So, it's like, let's tackle it. And some things have had to give. And I think for me, unfortunately, it's been that self-care piece. I know that's important, but it's like, oh my gosh, is there any more time in the day? So still working on that part, but it's just been trying to figure out how to redirect and pivot and maintain, and still do what you do and keep the community engaged.
Absolutely. Now, each of you mentioned care in some form, right? Whether that is self-care, lack of self-care, care for others, your staff, your community, your families. To that end, generally, as Black culture workers specifically, we have seen, held, and experienced a lot in the last year. And so the next thing I want to ask is, how are you? How is each of you? Rodney, we can start with you.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thank you for asking that question. I like to say it's customary for me to say I am well, and I am. I'm a spiritual person, so I have that to lean on, and I have good family support. But I found lately that I've been exhausted. I've been busy working, but it's been very emotional, and I've been fatigued. And I said, where's this fatigue coming from? And it's just so many. I'm a student of history, and the history allows me to see where a lot of these things that we're experiencing now have come from. It's not new, just manifest in different ways, and it frustrates me. And I've had to find myself leaning on my spiritual side, leaning on the fact that I know and love God to keep me from disliking, to keep me from having resentment, and keep me being hopeful.
Thank you for sharing that, Rodney. Lacey, Angela.
I feel like that's a question I ask myself pretty consistently throughout the day. How am I doing? And I feel like I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of friendships and family members who will ask me that, and who I will give a variety of honest or less honest answers depending on how the time is going. Like Rodney, as a student of history, I try very intentionally to seek out the hope in the situation. It's very fortunate that the site that I'm at, Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum, I'm working on and excited to talk about the research in the life of a woman who is doing advocacy in a lot of ways, searching for hope in situations that, not to compare different history times, but we're very different, but also very similar to the ones that we're living through. So it's important for me to take those moments and be like, well, Charlotte was doing some stuff and she was doing really, really well. I can take the time to rest and figure out what I can do best on my next step, knowing that people like Charlotte were working throughout this for decades before me. I rely a lot on my friends checking in on me, honestly. It really is a moment by moment kind of thing. I've been really trying. It's something I'm just a process on,
For me, and I'm sort of like where Lacey and Rodney both are. Yes, how are you today? I'm well. How are you today? I don't know. How are you today? I'm not gonna tune into certain things that I feel might upset me more, and I tend to bend towards those things that bring me, even if it's short-term joy, the music that I love, a book, a movie, those things, because I just feel like we have to do what we have to do in order to maintain. Largely, it's been, things have moved so quickly since we shut down last March. And, I have been busier now than I was before the shutdown, honestly, because as Rochelle mentioned earlier, you still have the day-to-day operations. You still have to do the things that you're required to do, but then you add the countless numbers of applications that you complete for hopeful grant funding, the relationships that you continue to build so that you continue to forge relationships that could lead to funding or could lead to program partners, collaborations, all of the things that you do. And each new thing leads to another work thing. So it's a never ending cycle. And I don't begrudge it because it has really helped sustain me as the executive director, which in turn has helped me to support everyone else, and they in turn support me. But it's there are times when when I'm at the computer, because I'm still working from home, we're all working remotely, but honestly, I will find myself just losing myself in the work. And, I can look up and it's dark and I will have started in the morning. So I've had to try to pull back a little bit and just tell myself that it's going to be there. You don't have to accomplish that whole checklist on a day-to-day basis because it's impossible anyway. And just think about how else you can do it and not burn yourself out. So sometimes I feel like I'm approaching the burnout, but then some small bit of joy will hit me, and I'm like, oh wow, I'm wide open all over again. So it's it's up and down, you know.
Thank you, Angela. And for Shell, how are you?
It depends on the day. I am someone who historically has always answered the question, I'm well, how are you? Like Rodney, just I'm well, how are you? But I have had the privilege of working at the Montlieu Center where we encourage and celebrate the whole self showing up. So if on that day you are not well, you are encouraged to say you are not well. And if you want to expound on why you're not well, you can. And so when we were having the summer, which was not just the pandemic, but full of the protest, really, I think, triggering events for Black Americans, and just hard, just like every day was hard. And it was something else, and something else. I could say, I can't deal with you all today. I need to do some internal work, and I'll show up tomorrow. And there was space for that. And so again, it's a privilege to be able to work in that kind of environment where it is understood that you are having an experience that might be different than your white counterparts. And we can talk about that. There's receptivity to that. And I cannot say more, just give more love and appreciation to being in an environment where Paulie's legacy includes showing up as one's whole self. You don't have to hide anything. You shouldn't be expected to hide anything. And that gave such an opportunity for grace, for myself, to give myself grace and to receive grace during this period. So it depends on the day. Today I'm having a good day. Thank you for asking.
Of course. And you all, uh-oh, am I muted? Oh, no, unmuted, excuse me. You all mentioned having to navigate the realities of the pandemic, make work, right? Still do the things. And with that in mind, for Shell, the Montlieu Center launched a major fundraising campaign during the pandemic. Talk to us about the challenges and triumphs of garnering support for that campaign during this moment.
I'll try to be brief here, Angela. When I understood the gravity of what was happening, at first I thought the world was just experiencing a slight little hiccup. It was March, we'd be fine by June. This is not gonna impact end of year fundraising. It was gonna be okay. And then when the gravity started to hit, I realized we might be in a world of hurt. As some of you may be aware, the Montlieu Center has a major fundraising campaign that's ongoing because we are set to open our physical site, our physical location at the end of 2021. And while we do have some grant funds from the National Park Service and some other entities, we still have to raise funds for the inaugural exhibits and just overall, we have to still continue our fundraising. And so when the pandemic hit, I started watching the stock market fluctuations, started reading probably too many articles from the nonprofit journals about how nonprofits were going to be impacted by the pandemic. And I became very concerned, such that I talked to our executive leadership and to our board about really setting a really low expectation around fundraising for 2020. Now, much to my chagrin now, I can say that we smashed the fundraising expectation that we had. And I think one of the tools was that one of the grants we had was for a fundraising consultant. And we leveraged that. We used Ruth Peebles with the INS group out of Raleigh. Ruth really sought to understand the organization. It was not a cookie cutter because Pauline Murray Center is not a cookie cutter organization, but we had a training that not just our fundraising committee attended, but a training that the entire board had to attend. And to say that, I don't want to make parallels between the military campaign, but our fundraising campaign for 2020 had some military overtones. There was tactics and there were strategies, there were benchmarks. And I have to say that everyone rose to the occasion, everyone showed up, contributed, and everyone gets a gold star. Everyone, but it took that time to sort of stop, assess our position, look at the historical data of our donors, and then look at our resources to figure out what's the best use of limited resources. How can we take $5,000 and leverage it to $35,000, $65,000, $100,000? And that's what we did. Sometimes, and I know that's kind of a luxury, but we had grant funds, and we were able to use those grant funds for the necessary training to get all of our board on the same page, to get our messaging all aligned. And then we actually had a board that was truly committed. They want to see this project through. And it takes that sort of individual commitment, not just the executive leadership saying, this is something we want to do. It takes that individual commitment to see the job through. So we did well, and I am reactivated and reinvigorated for what our 2021 fundraising campaign season looks like.
Thank you, Rochelle. And I really appreciate what you said about taking a moment to stop, to assess, and then to activate, to move forward. And with this in mind, Rodney, that's something that you did at the Greensboro History Museum. Under your leadership, GHM used digital tools and digital programming to respond to the uprisings against white supremacy and the murders of Black people by police this summer. Please talk to us about that work. How did you lead it, move it forward, and get your institution on board?
Well, I think COVID-19 helped me in that respect. I was always in the classroom when I taught. I was always moving around. I couldn't be still. So I thought initially that COVID-19 was going to affect me. I was going to be shut in one place. But while I was teaching, one of the tools that I found that influenced my students, they're digital natives. They're born into this technology that we have. I'm a digital immigrant. I had to learn it. And so I found that there was a such thing as a instructional technology degree, and I went out and got a master's in that. And so when COVID hit, it's using technology to teach. Most people hear IT, they think I can fix the computer. I'm like, no, I can't fix it. I can get an iPad or something, help you instruct. But so when this happened, it was right in my wheelhouse. And then plus I worked in radio. So when I initially took the job, one of the first things I started doing was a podcast that we call History Notes. And so we already had a digital footprint somewhat to start. And then when this happened, we just said, oh, we have to amp up. I still meet with the county in the different school districts and charter schools. And all of a sudden they had money now that they didn't have before to get devices and things because of the digital platforms that were needed. And so I was in demand. I didn't have to beg. And so when I said, let's do a webinar series, I had them at hello. And so like some of you have said, I've become more busy now and reach more people than we did prior to COVID-19. I had an event that I put together, put a lot of time in, and I just knew all these teachers were going to come out because I still think like a teacher. And I sent out a map to probably 500 people. About 15 people showed up to my event. We have an auditorium that seats 149. We had 15. But we've done webinars that reached 300 people from different parts of the country. And so to speak to that exhibit specifically, when that happened and we saw people just say, forget the restrictions, we're going out and we're going to protest, we realized this was history happening now and that we had to have a presence for it. And so it was important. And by me, I'm the only African-American curator at the museum. I'm the first and only. And I was approached by the city, and my boss's boss is an African-American woman that runs the libraries department. And the city, after the reaction, I'll try to keep it short, but after what happened with George Floyd, the killing of George Floyd, the city, to their credit, took an effort to really put forth Juneteenth. And they passed a resolution. It's an official holiday for our city, but they wanted to do more than just mark the program. They wanted to have a real presence. And they approached me and, blatantly said, we want to do this, but we need an African-American face. And so right away with my instructional technology hat on, I started thinking, how can we do this? So I did a video in my house with my little fancy lights that you saw earlier, and superimposed, had a green screen. So did a video, Juneteenth Traditions and History. Did a segment with Dame from Dame's Chicken and Waffles there in Durham, and I think he's in Cary. Dame and I used to go to school together. And so did a segment with him, did a Divine Nine webinar. We did a Juneteenth bingo. And by the end of the day, we had over 20,000 viewers just for those programs and others. And so we saw that, we could really affect change. We could really reach some people and have an impact with these digital platforms. So we started a webinar series. Some of the topics that we talked about are teaching controversial history, where we discussed the Greensboro 79 massacre. We talked about lessons in racism, remembering a lynching, where it was the lone documented lynching in Guilford County. It happened in 18, I'm missing the year of 1887, I'm sorry. And so we started that webinar series. Since we've done Indigenous in North Carolina, Indians represented as mascots, missing and murdered Indigenous women, even Holocaust education. And we're about to start a focus on Black History Month, some topics that are going to be pretty challenging coming up in February, dealing with police qualified immunity, school resource officers in the school to prison pipeline, and other things. And that's jumped off into it excites me. From meeting different people from all these avenues, we started talking to folks, and they said, man, you need to reach out to Jesse Jackson. We're losing a lot of folks. Let's have a conversation with him. So all he could do was tell me no. Reached out to Jesse. He called me back. We had an interview. In the interview, he said that the Bennett Bells were the sustaining force behind the sit-in movement, which I'd heard Bennett and A&T and some others. So I said, let's do a documentary. So now we're launching a documentary called Hidden Heroes about the Greensboro women behind the sit-in movement. I did a show for the city of Greensboro. Some 4 or 5 white guys were watching, and it was about Gillespie Park Golf Course. And I won't go into all that, but they were looking at golf and the game of Greensboro. My research led me to Dr. George Simpkins Jr., who went to the Supreme Court, lost 4-5, but made a lot of noise with the Greensboro Six. He also sued Cone Hospital, set the precedent to integrate hospitals nationwide. And my partner came up with a slogan. The 6 of them, when they went to play, paid 75 cents a piece to play. It totaled $4.50, and it led to all this change. So we just launched a documentary on MLK Day called 450 and Change, A Life of Perseverance. We've talked to Chief Justice Henry Fry, former mayors. And so all of these things have shown that you can make more than just a regional footprint, but you can sometimes hit on a national scale if you use this digital platform, but you just remain engaged and genuine. And I learned from teaching that people don't care how much you know, they want to know how much you care. And so I always had that mindset, and you can do that digitally. It's not as effective as in person, but you can still do that if you have passion about what you do.
Absolutely. Rodney, that is incredible work. And I think it's interesting how sort of a city shifted its relationship with your institution, and the result is such a wealth of resources, and really an evolution of your role, and the role that technology plays for your institution and now your city. And thinking of city relationships and community relationships, Angela, Lacey, Frashelle, I'd like to hear from you. Each of your institutions is very deeply connected to the communities in which they are located. So tell us, how have your relationships with your communities shifted or grown as a result of the pandemic? And how have you served your communities during the pandemic? Angela, we can begin with you.
Okay, thanks. Well, we've always focused on developing partnerships, collaborative relationships, because it's so much easier to reach more people if you're doing it collectively. So we are located in the historic Hayti community. We're just a few blocks down Fayetteville Street from NCCU. And we've been able to develop a strong collaboration with the College of Arts and Sciences there. And some of the things that we have done are, part of our music series. So for example, the College of Arts and Sciences professors and students, they perform every January at Hayti in celebration of Dr. King's holiday and celebrating his legacy. We are partners with the Durham Symphony Orchestra. Many people do not even know that Durham has a symphony orchestra, or that the maestro of the symphony orchestra is an African-American conductor, the only African-American symphonic conductor in the South, and he is an amazing person. Our own North Carolina Jazz Ensemble. So we've got some strong partnerships, but also with the external, with the city. I serve on Durham's Cultural Advisory Board, and that has been a good resource for me to be able to learn more and to support artists, because that is so much a part of what we aim to do, is supporting our artists. We're about history and heritage, but also about programs that promote and advance the African American experience. So we have developed those partnerships. We've gone from inside the brick and mortar pre-COVID to outside. We were able to apply for and secure a grant that was a part of the National Safe Routes to Parks. And we're still working on that project to develop a safe path from Hayti to Black Wall Street Gardens, which is considered downtown Durham. Of course, the 147 highway just totally decimated the historic Hayti community and much of Black Wall Street. And we are the last original structure. Our venue is the last original structure from that time. So it's been standing the test of time since 1891. So while preserving that history and that culture is important to us, but we also know that through the arts, we can broaden that, and we can look to the future. It's not just about preserving history, but it's continuing to tell our stories, because as Rodney indicated earlier, we are a part of history. Everything we've lived through since March, we are part of that history. All of the things that we have seen around us, that we've experienced, the Black Lives Matter movement, everything, we are part of that history. So how we tell those stories, and first of all, us telling our stories, that's the most important, but how we tell our stories is really important. So we look to build and forge relationships that support our mission and our goals and our values of just uplifting the community, supporting artists, supporting the arts, and using arts as our platform. So we've done it through with the shift to virtual and live stream programs. We've been operating since April, when we started out celebrating National Jazz and Poetry Month with Piano and a Poet, and we have continued. We're in the last couple of series in our jazz tribute series with live performances that are live streamed. We just released the Herbie Hancock tribute, but our Poetry Slam team is now back on a limited basis, in person, monthly, with performances, social distance, small numbers, but most of our program is still virtual. Our African dance classes has resumed, but it's virtual, so that sort of thing. But what we've done is to be able to use those platforms to continue to engage the community, to continue to let folks know that Hayti is there to support the community, but also, you know, it's important to support our artists, because the arts, you know, they've lost a lot with COVID. You know, venues have closed and artists are struggling, you know, those who have depended on their arts for survival. So being able to uplift and support our artists of color has been really, it's been a focus, and it's been good that we have been able to do that through our virtual and live stream program. We've done a couple of drive-in movies for the community that folks could just come out, because there was a period this summer when people, I think, were sort of at their saturation point of being sheltered. So sitting in your car, you know, with still a level of security and safety. And we're planning a virtual film festival, and we're also planning in the summer. So Rodney, you need to, I need to send you some information. We're hosting a summer institute of educators, and with Bao Learning Tree, and it's going to be an amazing virtual experience. So those are the things we continue to do to try to engage, you know, new partners, to continue the ones we have. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say the funders who have supported Hayti, the stakeholders who've supported Hayti, have been invaluable. They have, you know, really given us that extra confidence, that extra ability to increase capacity so that we can do what we do, because we still have to maintain a building that's been there since 1891 that has issues, and for which we are totally responsible.
Thank you, Angela. Lacey, what about you at Charlotte Hawkins Brown? How have relationships shifted, grown, and what are the ways in which you've served your community during this moment?
One of the fortunate things about working at the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum is that I came into a site in which people were already care so much about the site and all different facets of it. It was a former school. Dr. Charlotte Hawkins Brown was involved in equal rights and voting rights, and there's sports history, agriculture history. There's a lot of different ways to get into and then invested in the story of this particular site. So people who were coming, and the people who were coming to us after I arrived to meet the new site manager, to figure out how they could get involved, were passionate, and that's exciting to be a part of. So the two notable things that I want to touch on in terms of related to our community was we are in Sedalia, North Carolina, which is within Gibsonville. So, and the member of the City Council of Sedalia reached out to us because there was a census training team that was looking for a place to rent to do trainings, which we saw as an opportunity to use our space and have them do the training here. So they were here for about 4 days during the summer, in which it was early enough that there weren't a lot of people coming on the site to do tours, or we were still, I was still new enough that a lot of our team was still doing a lot of dreaming about what we wanted to do long-term and in the near future. But we had people on the site, and we had people on the site who were interested in making an accurate representation of our country in 2020. And there were a lot of difficulties going on with the census at that time, but it was good to have them here and see that that process was continuing during the many struggles of that time. Related to that, not too long after, we got called to ask if we would like to be an early voting site. So for those who don't know, the Charlotte's was very involved in voting rights for women, but for all women, but including Black women in the South, which is a crucial part of our story that we always try to emphasize as much as possible. So we jumped at the chance to be an early voting site. We knew it would have been a historic election, but I don't think we understood the scope of it. So once we opened up the gates and they'd put all their things into our Kimball Hall to have that space in there, they were there for about 2.5 weeks. We had over 10,000 people vote on our site. The first day we had, I don't remember how many we had the first day, but the mayor of Sedalia was voting that same day, and he was positive that was the most people who had been in Sedalia at any one time at all. We were trying to figure out, we'd had a lot of figuring out in terms of parking and making sure people were like caring for the space and working the traffic. But you can't, it's important to recognize and stop and pause and realize how crucial it is that on a site where Black students were being taught and educated in a private space, in a boarding space, where the leader of the school was actively involved in advocacy for all women, we had people coming to cast votes, many of them for the first time. Many of them for the first time in the presidential election. Everyone had their own different stories, and that it's never not inspiring to come in and see a line of people ready to vote and make a decision like that. It was, no matter how late some of us definitely stayed on some of those nights and how schedules definitely shift, it was still inspiring to see. I had a moment where I opened up the site one time and then I put up the American flag, and the guy who was opening up for the voting thing literally had to stop for a moment to watch the flag go up before the sunrise so he could open up the space to vote. Like, it was a thing that I always had to remind myself of. In addition to that, one of our stronger connections is with the NCNW, National Council for Negro Women. Have been very consistent on our site, and they came by to do to bring waters and snacks to the poll workers on a particular Sunday. And over the summer, they also had a full diaper. Oh gosh, there was one of the members who was giving birth soon, and they wanted to have a bunch of hold a full thing to raise money and support for a newborn child coming in, which was gorgeous to see. Like, there's all these little moments that during all of this that I was just like, the connections here are so strong that I can't be too frustrated the entire time of just trying to learn this position and learn the site and work with my coworkers. And there's these moments still, like, as soon as I get them, I just have to hold on to them as long as I possibly can.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lacey. Rochelle, I'm going to ask you to lead off on our last question. But before we hop to that, I do want to note we've got about 13 or so minutes left. So if you do have questions, please drop them in the chat. We will begin our question and answer session with our panelists in just a moment. And I did see a couple trickle in. So again, Rochelle, if you would lead us off, please share one thing that you have learned about leading an institution through crisis. And then I will let the rest of our panelists share.
So Angela, one of the things that I would say I've learned is the importance of checking in with your team, getting feedback from your team. Leadership means, for me, it means getting input from the people who might be impacted by the decisions that we're making. I believe that I've always sort of practiced leadership by democracy, but during a pandemic when no one knows what's happening and what's to be expected, it became even more pivotal, more critical to establish where everyone was, both physically, mentally, what was going on with their families and their personal life, to really get a grasp on what are the decisions that need to be made right now and which ones can be punted for a little bit. Leadership is not about telling people what to do. It's not about bossing people around. It's none of those things that we've seen on sitcoms or bad television shows. It really comes down to recognizing that the people that you work with are your greatest resource, and caring about them makes for a better organization, which means that you are able to have better impact, greater impact on the communities that you're serving. So during this pandemic, the one takeaway that I will keep with me throughout the rest of my time in the working world is checking in with the people that I'm working with, whether that's my personal team or the folks I'm collaborating with, and not just looking at a CV or a resume and going, okay, you're the right person, and that you can always do this job the same way you've always done it. No, it's a check in on a regular basis.
Thank you for Michelle. Rodney? We've got you on mute.
I'm sorry. One of the things I've learned since the pandemic is to appreciate those around me, and everyone has something to offer. Even if you don't think they are experienced in a certain area, they all have something to offer. Everyone that I work for is gifted at what they do, but we can all come together and contribute in some way. And it makes me feel like I have a sense of belonging, and it also makes me feel like I have a value there. And so I've shifted, one of the things I learned, I keep saying I learned from teaching and even in the military, but what I've shifted is I don't have to spend time telling a student or anybody who they're not. Spend time telling who they are and building folks up. That other stuff can be worked out. You can help them with that. And this kind of came about, you asked me that question. I didn't talk about the chief thing, the exhibit that we got that was a result of the death of George Floyd, the demonstrations that took place, and we took the murals off of the plywood that the people had painted, and we collected some of them. And right away, my boss acknowledged, he says, we don't know this story. We got to start talking to people. We got to get out there and start getting, we can't curate this. It has to be a community curation. And it led to us dealing with a 5-time Grammy Award winner who had a say in the exhibits that we have, and talking to an African-American sheriff of Guilford County and an African-American police chief. What's it like to be a leader in law enforcement during this time? But it showed me the importance of people felt appreciated. Some of the folks, the protest organizers that we talked to, they said, no one's reached out, said you were the first organization to reach out to us and say, how are you doing? Not what can we get from you? And so I said, let me just start calling folks, even when I don't need anything, checking on people, saying, how are you doing? I appreciate what I saw you did, all these type things. So it's just learned me to be more appreciative and more thankful and more connected.
Thank you, Rodney. Angela, I'll ask you to share, and then Lacey, if you would close us out quickly. And got questions rolling in, really excited about that.
I think one of the big lessons I've learned is, I told you guys earlier, being in the arts world, I love music, and one of my favorite groups, old groups, the Pointer Sisters, Yes We Can. So I've learned yes we can, and with that, thinking of failure is really not an option if you are determined to succeed. So I'm gonna co-sign on what everyone else before me who spoke has said. Absolutely, you do not succeed alone or in a vacuum. And when you have a team, when you have, whether it's your staff, your board, your volunteers, whether it's your own personal family, whoever that is, that village is, there has to be transparency. There has to be a real positive sense of yes we can and we will do it, and then there has to be that very strategic sound plan with a purpose, so that you know how you're going to do it. And you might have to make those adjustments along the way, but if you've got all of those things in place, then I think you're going to appeal not only to those people whom you work, but also those whom you serve. And those who are on the outside, you don't know who else is looking, but you will have an opportunity to touch someone who in turn will tell your story, who in turn will tell your story. So I think that's one of the things I've learned.
And then to finish off, I will be quick. I will start again by co-signing everything that's already been said. As a relatively new leader, I'm taking all of this conversation as well as something to take to heart as I go forth in this position as well. But I think what was highlighted for me coming into this position is honest communication with everyone I talk to. I very much know that a lot of us struggle during the last year, and a lot of us, but we all still have passion for what we can do and what we can accomplish through this. So it was very much like me coming to every conversation with, how can we make this work? How can we make this effective? And how can we care for each other at the same time? If you need a day off here, absolutely. But I know that you're gonna come back and caring just as much about how to make this project work. So I'll finish off there.
Wonderful. Well, colleagues are really friends. Thank you so much for your time and energy today. Thank you for sharing. This was a wonderful, wonderful conclusion to what has been a fruitful yet intense series. And I hope that your words will help to lift, inspire, and ground other African American heritage practitioners from across the state. So thank you. I'm going to ask Adrian Nearday to lead us through the questions that we have received so that you all can respond to them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Angela. I'll start with just a very quick question directed towards Lacey. Do you know if Charlotte Hawkins Brown will serve as a voting site in the future?
I do not know at this moment in time. That'll be something that'll probably be decided by the Guilford County Board of Elections shortly before the next election. I definitely told them in our conversations leading up to it and after that we felt like we were a good site, and we had been early voting site in the past. Some point around 2018, 2016, we were no longer an early voting site. So we were happy to return to doing that, and we'd like to keep that tradition up. We'll see what happens.
Wonderful, thank you. I always think it's such a wonderful thing when museums can serve their community in that way. I think it's really important. Also, we have received a question asking about how folks have worked to recruit and manage interns during the pandemic. Have any of you had experiences with that this year?
I'm happy to speak to that because we were able to, another one of our partners is Duke University, and we went through one of their public policy and arts programs and were able to secure a summer intern. And it just so happens that she's also an artist, and she was a senior at Duke, but it worked out so well, and she was so good. Even when the campus closed and she was at home in Florida, she was still helping us virtually. And we were able to keep her throughout the year. So she's with us until she graduates in June. And that we have had other internship experiences, but this by far has been the best experience that we have had, and she has helped us tremendously. And she was paid, but it was a partnership with Duke, so that their public policy program actually paid her. And so we were very fortunate to be able to do that. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So we don't necessarily use interns, the word, but we have students. Some of them are work study students from Duke. We have Moxie interns that are coming from UNC Chapel Hill. We get them in the summer, usually one per summer. And we also have this Durham Civil Rights map marker team, which is comprised of mostly Duke University students, but they are all over the country at this point. And being able to work remotely has been, it was a challenge initially to make sure that everyone had the hardware and the software needed. But after that initial hump, we've been able to work with our student teams probably even more efficiently because we're able to meet with them. No one has to sort of travel to our space. We can just jump on a Zoom and have calls and conferences. And so managing teams has been easier in some regards. We miss face-to-face interaction. We miss the ability to celebrate accomplishments with our team, with our student team especially. We have to thank them for what they do with food. What you do with students, you feed them. And so we miss the opportunity to do those things, to thank them. But it's helped us become more effective in our working style with students.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rochelle. We also received a question regarding connections with donors and contributors during this period of no physical events and no FaceTime, which they found very valuable at their institution. However, they're finding that grantors and corporate funders are more adept at managing relationships remotely. Has this been any of your experiences?
When they say more adept at managing,
have you had challenges with managing these sort of relationships now that they are virtual?
Oh, we have not. In fact, we applied for a whole lot of grants, but we actually were able to get funding from a couple of new sources, which we were just really happy to do. One of the things that a lot of these funders have shifted to COVID-19 relief type grants, but also because we're historic and we're on the National Historic Register, we've been able to get some preservation funding as well. But you know, we've had no trouble navigating. In fact, in some ways, it's helped facilitate, because you know, we've been able to just get contacts, go online, submit information, gather information, report information virtually, and it's worked fine for us.
That's great to hear. I know during one of our previous webinars, we had been given advice about fundraising, and I think sometimes as nonprofits, we get worried about making that ask, and they really encouraged us to continue making that ask, even though it has been a challenging year, that, you know, we still have needs and we still are very much serving our communities. So that it's important that we're standing up for ourselves. First of all, I want to thank all of our presenters for joining us, for taking time out of their day to share their insights and experiences for what has been a challenging year, but for which, as we've discussed, you know, we're more important to our communities than ever. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in as well. Or if there are any ways that the African American Heritage Commission can serve you in your professional development in the future, we would love to hear it. But I thank you all, and I do hope that you have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and that you stay safe as well.